I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah. Katie, can you guys hear us?
Let me try another microphone. Can you hear us online?
Whoa, I can hear you really good now. Before I couldn't.
Okay. Thank you.
Hmm.
We have the two wireless mics.
Two wireless mics, yeah.
Why don't I give you the word? That which you. Yeah, those, if you compete, so one's on the other one. Okay.
All right, welcome everyone. I need an approval for agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda as published.
I second.
Please do a roll call. We have a first and a second.
Counselor Thunderberg.
Aye.
Counselor Duffloff.
Aye.
Counselor Katie McMillan.
Aye.
Counselor Smith.
Aye.
Counselor Dennis McMillan. Counselor McLean. Commissioner Leon Tejeda. Commissioner Nobles.
Aye.
Commissioner Jones. Commissioner Cooper.
Aye.
We're going to move right into public comment. It's time. Public comment. This segment allows community members to share their opinions, raise concerns, and provide information directly to city council. Comments should address city-related issues and must not pertain to items scheduled for public hearing on the same evening's agenda. If you wish to speak, please complete the sign-up sheet, including the topic you wish to address. Please begin by stating your name and address when called to the podium. Speakers are allotted 5 minutes unless otherwise directed. Please note, comments criticizing city programs and operations are permitted, permitted during the segment. However, criticism of individual city employees are not allowed during the public comment period. Concerns regarding city employees should be submitted in writing to the city's human resource manager for proper review. Thank you for your cooperation. But first up, it looks like Darla Huxell.
Let's have you with microphone right now. Thank you. You can
Swing
stick
it
it
the
out
right
and
way.
stand.
Not a rock star. Darla Huxell, for. I'm here about urban renewal. Again, with relationship to special districts. I spoke last meeting about that and my concern with it, as far as the impact that it has on special districts. One other thing that I just want to mention tonight is, you talked about, you want to be transparent and everything. We're going to talk about a governing body for this urban renewal. My suggestion is having all of the council members do that, have 2 council members, so 2 members representing special districts and 2 members of the public. Again, urban renewal districts have a direct impact on special districts. Unless we can address something to make them whole, then generally speaking, I don't think that special districts for urban renewals. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have a written statement as well that I'll read into the record. This is from Heidi Seif, Umatilla High School District, or Umatilla School District, I'm sorry. As superintendent of the Umatilla School District, I cannot share our official stance because we weren't notified of the proposed action, so the board hasn't discussed it. Dave briefly mentioned an urban renewal district in November 2024, but that's all we've received. While I appreciate the city's willingness to create creative funding, the school district and other taxing districts must be involved in the discussion that impact our tax revenue. I'm concerned that the city is again making agreements and taking actions that directly impact all taxing districts without prior discussion. This echoes the taxation without representation concern from the American Revolution. When money is involved, those impacted should have a voice. Taxing districts, including the school district, haven't demanded specific enterprise zones funds. We've simply asked for a meeting and conversations. We've asked for a seat at the table to discuss future funding and clear formula for distributing enterprise zone funds for capital construction. When the city seeks a bond, it impacts every taxing district's ability to do the same. When the city signs an enterprise zone agreement for itself and the county without other taxing districts' input, tax funds are routed, sometimes benefiting only the city and county, or some not at all. For an urban renewal zone, while I can't state the board's exact priority, I believe a minimum request would be a formula to equitably serve all taxing districts for capital improvements. This formula should also consider any tax impact to the school district if the local tax revenue exceeds the state school fund amount, as a negative impact on our local tax revenue would only occur if that level of local funding is reached. I see an urban renewal and enterprise zone as an opportunity and support their general concepts. However, it's simply asking for a community solution that requires community meeting and community collaboration. Thanks for your service, Heights. All right. So we should move on to number 6, new business.
All right, Council President, if you'd like. So we have with us here, our first item, 6.1 is Umatilla Economic Opportunities Analysis and Employment Buildable Lands Inventory. We have our consultants from Johnson Economics here. I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll get them squared away here and they'll be able to share their screen as well. So Brendan, you are up if you are ready.
Thank you. I'm ready. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Brendan Buckley. I am a consultant with a firm called Johnson Economics, and I'm here with Andrew. Andrew Parrish is with the firm of MIG, and we've been working together on what's called economic opportunities analysis for the city of Umatilla. This is something that we completed a former version about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's time to re-up this, particularly with how quickly your economic development has been happening in your community. So we want to tonight give a overview of the project and our findings so far, sort of where we're at. We have a complete draft of the work done, but it's not finalized. And so we want to present it to you and get any feedback or questions that you have on the process. So I'm going to share my presentation if I could. It looks like the host needs to enable me to share my screen maybe.
Yeah, give us about 10 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, you're all set.
Thank you. Okay. There, hopefully you can see a presentation.
We can, yes.
Great, okay. So Andrew and I will just talk a little bit about the opportunities analysis. I work on the demand side and sort of jobs forecast part of it, and Andrew has worked on the land inventory side. So I'll turn it over to him when the time comes. So what is an economic opportunities analysis? Some of you may have been involved in the last one, but just as a refresher, so what it is, the name economic opportunities analysis comes from state statute actually, but what it really is it's an assessment of the community's demand for employment land and a look at your current supply in order to compare the two. And once we come up with an assessment of the need over 20 years for employment lands and compare it to your inventory, then we come up with findings of, do you have enough land right now? Will it be sufficient for the 20-year planning period? If not, what does that mean? What types of land might you need? So we'll come up with that comparison, and then at the end of the process, we also update the city's comprehensive plan, the economic development chapter, and also take a look at the city's development code, just to see if there's any updates coming out of our analysis that need to be reflected there. So just to let you know, when we talk about employment lands, we're talking about generally any land that's zoned either for commercial use, so that would be office, retail, those types of uses, or industrial use, which would be light industrial, heavy industrial generally. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But it does not include your residential lands. It does not include your housing lands at all, which is a separate type of analysis. So where we're at in the process, we work on these initial sort of technical pieces to the left, coming up with the forecast for job growth and the amount of employment lands that are needed associated with that growth. We go through a process of talking about the community's economic trends and goals and objectives and target industries and things like that to feed into those job projections. And then we do the land inventory on the other side and compare the two. And all of that goes into economic opportunities analysis report, which was in your packet. And coming out of that is going to be the discussion of policies and what it means, what the next steps might be. So a quick overview of what we found. This is just a snapshot of current employment in city of Umatilla. You have approaching 3,000 jobs there now in a range of industries. The largest single sector is related to agriculture, and that is actually can be a little bit deceptive because that sector includes a lot of firms where the company itself or the business is based in the city, but actually a lot of the work they're doing is being done in rural agricultural lands outside of the city. But that employment is sort of counted towards the city's total. So that's just one caveat there. But the other firms, you'll see how your local employment is broken down with agriculture set aside, construction, your education sector, some government roles, retail, increasingly the information sector, which includes data centers, are all other significant parts of your overall employment picture. So starting with that employment profile, what we do is we come up with a forecast that we apply for the next 20-year period. We start with a couple of benchmarks that the state suggests as a starting point, and one comes from Oregon Employment Department. They do jobs forecast for the different industry sectors by subregion. So they do one for a combination of Umatilla and Morrow County, where they predict how much these sectors are going to grow over the next 10-year period. Is the period they use. So we first applied those and see what that looks like. When we applied that to Umatilla's baseline employment, it came out to what would be an annual growth rate of about 0.7% per year. But what we know is that's probably pretty conservative. because when we look backwards, we know that the city's employment has actually grown by just about 5% each year. So that on a compounding rate over 10 or 20 years, that's a lot faster than this 0.7% growth rate would reflect. And so what we do is we say, okay, how do we reflect what we know, what has been happening in the area, and what we project is going to happen in the future, take in additional context and thoughts, and come up with an adjusted forecast that's probably a little more realistic. So the way we do that is we reflect the target industries and local goals that we talk about through this process. A major one in your area is obviously the data centers, which have been growing across the county and beyond. Those are bringing not just large developments, but they're bringing a lot of new type of technical jobs that weren't necessarily there 10 or 15 years ago. A lot of construction jobs to work on these really big projects. And then the amount of economic activity involved in these huge investments creates other, what we call indirect and induced employment in the community. So all that economic activity means that there needs to be more people providing all the other services and things that a community needs, because all that extra activity and workers and households are coming to the area. The other thing that we looked at specifically in the case of Umatilla is your very rapid household growth and home building. So we're going to make sure that we took that into account, because all of those new households have their own demand that comes with them, for especially for things like services, retail, groceries, education, schools, healthcare, all those things that come with just a growing population. So we wanted to make sure that we reflected that rapid growth as well. So again, this just has to do with some of the things we were reflecting on when we were thinking about the adjusted growth rate. We know that just countywide, the things I mentioned, like construction, education, and health, are growing well over that 0.7% I mentioned, and especially information, which includes the data centers, has been growing at 15. Employment in that sector has been growing at 15% per year, and there are more data centers being completed this year and next year in the pipeline that we know of. So that's obviously rapidly growing and has really sort of only been accelerating. So our adjusted forecast, which we've included in the report, estimates that over the next 20 years, by 2045, the community would be looking at close to 5,900 total jobs. And that's just about 3,000 new jobs, or really just about double the amount you have now. So the forecast comes out to pretty close to growth of doubling employment in the city of Umatilla. We reflected that there's already 4 probable data center projects that we know of in the current boundary, and but also forecast for more beyond that, because we know that that demand is there and that growth is only continuing. And those companies that we've worked with in other contexts, we know that are continuing to look for land and opportunities. So this growth rate that we came up with comes out to an annual average of 3.6% growth every year. Again, that still reflects a bit of a slowdown from what we've seen the past 10 years. And so while it seems like very rapid, robust growth, it is realistic, and it's in line with what the community has already seen, if enough land is available to host these new companies. So what we do with the jobs projection is we convert that into our estimate for how much land that will need. We look at the types of firms that hire for each of those sectors and the type of real estate space they use, and how that space is built, how much land it needs, and so on. And that gets us to an estimate of the types of land that are needed for different commercial uses or different industrial uses. Real briefly, an important one that we're talking about in this context, and with other communities that we've worked with in your region, is data centers. So you're familiar with these, you've obviously seen a lot of this activity over the last 10 years. But real briefly, this is kind of the standard for what they have been looking like recently. They tend to be 4 buildings of approaching 250,000 square feet each. And their size can vary a little bit, but they used to be closer to 100 acres. The newest ones over the last few years average more like 125 to 150 acres a piece. So for each one of these new developments that are coming or that the city would like to capture, you're talking about, you know, at least 125 acres needed for each of those developments. So this is our estimate when we take those jobs forecasts I just talked about and convert it into need for land. In the second row here says job share. Well, let me backtrack. What we've done here is we've broken out other types of industrial that do not include the data centers because they are such a unique thing and such a large part of this forecast that we've split them out so that we can look at other industrial types of use and talk about them a little separately. So what we find is that there's an estimated 20-year need for about 45 gross acres of commercial land and a little over 75 acres of other types of industrial land. And then when we look at the data centers, that's where, because these are such large acreage developments, there's a finding for the need for over 1,000 acres of data center land. And as we'll talk about in a minute, that includes some of these projects that are already identified within your current urban growth boundary, but with some additional as well. So I'll get into that. One important thing to note here is that, actually, wait, I'll get back into that in a minute. First, we're going to talk about the land inventory of the employment land you currently have. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew here. Talk about how we do that. You see that, Andrew?
Yeah, let me get my, okay, looks like my microphone's working now. All right, Andrew Parrish with MIG. I help Brendan on a number of these projects, looking at the land inventory side of things. So we start out looking at all of the land in the urban growth boundary and work our way through this kind of funnel diagram here, because we're really focused on just employment lands that are not currently already developed, or perhaps they're redevelopable, and we also take into account constraints like steep slopes, wetlands, floodplains, and also look at land needed for future infrastructure like rights of way and storm drainage and things like that. So we're really looking for the total amount of net buildable acreage within the urban growth boundary in order to compare with the need identified with Brendan's work. So our study area here is the urban growth boundary of Umatilla, and the city boundary is shown here kind of in that dark blue, but we are looking at everything within the urban growth boundary, so considerably larger than just what's in city limits. We use comprehensive plan designations for things that are outside city limits and zoning designations for the land that's inside the city limits to identify what's planned for employment uses as opposed to residential uses or open space or that kind of thing. So our picture of kind of what counts as employment land is shown here. There are about 2,500 gross acres of employment land within the urban growth boundary. And that is comprised of 345 tax lots. And so we'll break that down into what's vacant and partially vacant and developed in the next steps here. So as I mentioned, we do look at constraints. So the main ones impacting Umatilla are a number of wetland features that are mapped. Those are kind of shown in various colors on the map here, particularly kind of on the the eastern and central portions of the study area, and there's some wetlands and some kind of water related constraints near the Columbia as well, but I don't think those impact the employment land that we're looking at too much. Next slide. So to further kind of hone in on what's buildable, we have a couple of definitions that are established in state statute. So vacant land basically is larger than half an acre, or larger than half an acre and doesn't have anything permanent built on it, or it's larger than 5 acres and only a small piece of that is has permanent buildings on it. Or the overall improvement value of any structures on the land is very low compared to the value of the land itself. Partially vacant land is it has some amount of kind of improvement on it that's maybe low value compared to the land, the value of the land, and it has some portion of the site that is not improved. And so we use aerial photos for a smaller community like Umatilla. We can look site by site and see what appears to be developable. And other land is either categorized as developed or committed, depending on a couple of definitions that are in kind of the assessor's data that we use to look at this stuff. So we're really focused on the vacant and the partially vacant land here. And so the vacant land's shown in green on this map. Partially vacant is shown as yellow, and the constrained areas, those wetlands mainly, are shown in kind of a red hatch here. So there are some larger vacant parcels. There's a few that are partially vacant, and we worked with city staff to kind of truth some of these, and we know that there are projects planned for a number of these sites, and there were a couple that were large mining kind of quarry operations that are in the study area, but they have an ongoing kind of mineral concern, and so they're classified as developed on this map. So I believe the next slide will take us to some kind of totals. So we have in the report kind of the available acreage on vacant parcels and partially vacant parcels, and those get totaled up across all of the various zoning designations. And so we have a total of about 80 developable acres of commercial land in the urban growth boundary and about 470 acres of industrial land total, after we account for again, things like future rights of way and any existing development on the site that's expected to remain.
Thanks, Andrew. So that is the inventory of lands you have remaining. And so the next step is to compare the 20-year forecast I was discussing with that remaining inventory and see how they line up. And what we find is presented in this table. This is talking about sort of gross acreage that you have available, not necessarily the characteristics of the different sites. And I'll talk about on the next slide what's important about that. But the main takeaway is that our discussion of just sheer acreage that's needed and available doesn't always match up with having the right sites that you need. But in terms of the gross acreage, we find that there is currently a surplus of commercially zoned parcels. Those are, again, things for land for things like office and retail. But then when we get into industrial, we find that for other types of industrial, not including data centers, that there is at least a modest deficit right now of land for those uses compared to the 20-year need. And then when we get into the data center campuses, again, very large sites needed, and there's a much greater deficit for those large industrial sites. So the next step that we get into, and there's more detail on the report on all of this stuff, and we'll be happy to answer questions, but is looking at the actual sites you have left. So it's one thing to say, okay, you've got, 90 acres of commercial left, but it's all in sort of fragmented sites that are an acre large. Well, you're not going to meet everyone's needs with those 90 sites. So when we look at it, we try to compare the size of sites in the current supply to the estimated need. And on the commercial side, we find that the community does not really have any sites remaining that are over 20 acres. And I believe your largest sites you have remaining are maybe 15 or fewer acres. So on the commercial side, we find that there aren't really any medium to large sites left. For instance, for a good sized shopping center, a good sized business park type development. And so even though there's a finding of a land surplus, quote unquote, there may still be a need for some additional sites to meet those needs. On the industrial side, we find that a similar situation where there is more smaller size sites and a need for some medium to larger sites. And especially when you get to the larger sites of over 20 acres, there's a need, there's an increasing need for more sites. And then you get to the really large sites for the data centers of 125 acres at least. And we find that there is enough demand for 5 additional sites, even after we look at the projects that we know of in the pipeline in the current community. If you look at your current industrial land inventory, once those known projects are accounted for, that's the end of the community's large lot industrial supply, really, which is one of the major impetuses for undertaking this project now. So that's the finding, and there's much more about that in the report. And so what does it mean? What do these findings mean for the community? What do you do next? So findings that more land or more sites are needed generally lead to discussion of urban growth boundary, either expansion, swaps, or rezones, perhaps, if there's land in the current urban growth boundary that isn't well suited for what it's been zoned for instance. Maybe there's some land that you think has ended up being not very developable and may not be developable over the next 20 years, and you might look at doing a swap to move that capacity somewhere else, that type of thing. But really, in the case of Umatilla, through this project and discussing the staff, it looks like probably a UGB expansion is the most likely discussion point, at least, to be coming out of this process. Other things that the community looks at coming out of a EOA process is how to use the land you have more efficiently. So that can include doing some infill and redevelopment of key sites that are underused, maybe have an old or obsolete use on it, reusing what are called brownfield sites if they've been contaminated in the past, need to be cleaned up, but then it's going to be a good site for a new use after that. And then finally, the last point here is about making sure once you go through that process and talk about how the community might expand their employment lands, is to make sure that all your plans, and particularly your capital improvement plans, reflect that that's the path of growth and where the community needs to go next and have its infrastructure. And then the other step that we'll be taking as we look at the comp plan and development code is what perhaps you might be doing with your zoning code and standards that might also create some efficiencies and allow existing land to be used a little bit more efficiently. And we'll have some recommendations on that after we finish that next step. So that is a very quick overview of the work. And I know you have other things on your agenda tonight. So I wanted to just summarize that much and then open up for questions or comments on all this. And hopefully we can help answer anything else that you'd like to know.
I didn't see in the presentation any talk about the Corps of Engineer or BLM lands that we have, a lot of it tied up. I know Dave has a lot of experience with Trideck reclaiming miles of Columbia River up there for BLM land that wasn't being used as for what they originally took it for, and Texas has done a great job of that. Is there any, when you make the designations for the land that's available, how do you designate those lands that are tied up with BLM? Are they just dismissed, or is there a possibility we can go after some of that and try to reclaim it?
I can go ahead and try to answer that. I think the standard procedure is anything that's in federal ownership is considered not available for the city. But that might be a potential strategy if you have a finding of need. That's something that can be looked at kind of at the tail end of this process. But we're not considering it to be available, as is. Something needs to change in order for that to happen.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Andrew. Yeah, so, the natural outcome of these findings is to talk about, okay, you have this land need, particularly for industrial. Where are you going to look to serve that need? And then that might be the proper point for to start talking about those BLM lands and if it's possible to do something else there.
Commission, council, do you have any questions? Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, you're welcome.
Brendan, can we get control of the meeting back, please?
Here, Nancy wants control.
Just of our meeting.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, are you still seeing my screen?
No, excuse me, no, what? I'm not still seeing your screen, but I think we need to. What's his instructions there? Nancy needs to go to the host. You know how to do that, Brendan? Just get control back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm the host. Okay. I will need a moment.
You should have in the upper right corner of the City of Umatilla screen, Brendan, there should be an ellipsis up there. You can click on that and then you should be able to make us the host.
We
I
love
don't know
technology.
I don't know if I am the host. I'm sorry. Did you make me the host? All right, bear with me.
Right hand. A light of blue.
I'm sorry, Nancy. Is that you? If you're speaking to me, I'm afraid I can't hear you.
So if you hover over the City of Umatilla meetings, just hover over that with your cursor, and in the upper right-hand corner, there'll be 3 dots there. You can click on that, and then that should have an instruction there to make host.
Make host. Okay, I got it.
There.
There you go. Very sorry about that.
We've got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good. So I guess, are we looking for a motion to move for staff to do something at this point?
No, what we were looking at was if you had any questions or major concerns and what you saw there, any sort of methodology, we can get that included and then we can make updates to the draft plan. So included in your packet was the draft plan. This is the presentation that complements that. There's a couple items. What was that? Yeah, so Brendan, are you looking for us for next to bring back to finalize that draft and bring it back for final resolution? Is that what you need from us next? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think without, if there's more questions or comments or feedback that you would like to get to us now or after the meeting, please go ahead and relay that through staff. We will be finalizing a draft, without a ton of feedback. It'll probably be very similar to what we have. So we'll be finalizing that and bringing it back with the recommendation that you adopt it and going through the hearings process.
Great, thank you. So yeah, what we would need then, Council President, would be a motion to direct staff to work with Johnson Economics to finalize that draft and bring that back to you for final resolution.
Okay, I don't know. Does anybody have any questions about it or any concerns? To me personally, it looks great. Land has always been a big thing for us, especially because we're surrounded, as Kelly brought up, with so much federal ground. And a lot of times our citizens don't understand that. Like, how come you don't do this or this? And we're like, well, our hands are tied. So this, I think, will give us a snapshot of how and what we can do that's going to expand. Am I right, Dave? That's going to help us create more for the citizens of Umatilla.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing that's a little bit frustrating, so on his map of available industrial lands, there's about 350 of the 475-ish acres that was available is committed by contract, but it's considered available because they haven't broken ground yet. They don't have a building permit. So essentially all of the properties south on Wanapa Road and the industrial park are all green as available, but those are all under enterprise zone contract agreements, as well as the north section on Power Line Road for PDX 260 was also green. So but they stay in your inventory until they have that building permit. And so as we're, one of the things as we're looking at, a few years ago, we did a urban growth boundary expansion through DLC, and I'm glad to see Dawn here. I'm glad that she's here listening. But we're looking at doing that again. This is kind of first step, but until those lands, so in this finalized report, that's one of the things we're working on with Brendan, his team there, is to make sure that we have it pretty clear that once those have building permits and they're no longer in our inventory, when do we cross over that threshold to move that process forward as we look at the deficits in our urban growth boundary?
I like it.
Through that exercise on the last DTP expedition, and so we're just getting ahead on having the documentation put together. Assuming everything happens, and a plan that looks at will not be in a 4 or 6 month waiting period to collect information to support a UTP expansion.
Correct. So yeah, 2019 is when Johnson Economics helped us with our buildable lands inventory and EOA at that point in time. That served as the basis of that application. The UGB expansion was completed in 2022. And so just 3 years thereafter. And that was supposed to be a 20-year inventory expansion. And here we are again saying that we're out of land. So that's what we're looking at here. And of course, we understand that again, it is in our inventory because you never know until they actually get that building permit. But yeah, the idea here is that we're being proactive rather than reactive in making those plans.
Well, without any further discussion or questions, I'll take a motion.
Can I just ask?
Oh, yes.
This is probably the wrong forum for this, but can you shed any light for us on the reclamation of BLM? Is the city pursuing that at all? You have history with it. Is it possible for us? Do you think like we could do like Tridec did, or should we go after that?
The difference in Umatilla versus what we saw in the Tri-Cities with that work is that this area here is in in 35 UM1 and 35 UM13. So those are National Registers of Historic Places. 35 UM1 in particular is considered the most culturally rich designated area west of the Mississippi. And so versus Tri-Cities, they had cultural resources, but not designated National Register of Historic Places. So there's an extra large hurdle here that wasn't associated with the reconveyance efforts that were occurring there in the Tri-Cities. Is it possible? Sure. It's just going to take longer and more coordination with CTUIR and the BIA in order to, and all parties will need to be interested in moving it forward that way, whatever that might look like.
I guess the only thing would be how much of the BLM and core land is that, archaeological stuff. Is there another supply that's not, but it sounds like most of it is.
Yeah, most anything, whatever is not developed north of Fifth Street is virtually all in federal ownership, and almost all, not all, but most of all is in 35 UM1.
Thank you.
Very good. So without any further discussion or questions, I'll take a motion to direct staff to finalize the report and findings.
Council President, I would move to direct staff to finalize report findings and bring us resolution item 6.1.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Somebody seconded, so we're good to go.
Counselor Funderburk,
Oh, are we, what you call it?
Yes.
Roll call, thank you. Aye.
Counselor Duffloff.
Aye.
Counselor Katie McMillan,
Aye.
Counselor Smith,
Aye.
Counselor Dennis McMillan, Counselor McLean, Commissioner Leon Tejeda, Commissioner Gutierrez, Commissioner Nobles,
Aye.
Commissioner Jones, Commissioner Cooper.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, moving on to 6.2, creating an urban renewal agency. Before we get started, I did a little perusing while we were today and yesterday, and also just a minute ago. There's a lot of information out there, and I would encourage anybody to go to websites to see what other cities are doing. There's over 50 cities well over 50 cities in the state of Oregon that are doing this. It's very, very, very beneficial. And you need to read some facts about what they have on their website. I'm not challenging what's real, what's not. I'm just saying what's on their website that will give you a snapshot of some information that we received regarding in particular school districts and the taxing districts. So read what they say in there and take it from Burns has a really good website. So does LeGrand. So does Hermiston. Hermiston's got really informative stuff. They've been doing it for a while. So I'm just preempting it before we go, just to challenge everybody that's sitting at this table. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, President Duffloff. Also, Veronica, if you wanted to join us here at the table, you can pull up a chair here if you'd like. You don't need to be back there. Sorry that we didn't quite get the space for you here. Come on up. We can sit you right here next to Carol and Bruce if you'd like.
Oh, of me or everybody? Everyone? Okay, I'm sorry. You know, last week when we had the marathon, I could hear great in Canada. 2:00 in the morning.
All right, so on this item here tonight, we have Elaine Howard from Elaine Howard Consulting, and she's coordinated with Tiberius Solutions, who's also here on the report. So I will let her introduce herself, and we'll get started on information here on the urban renewal. Then I fully anticipate a lot of questions and discussion. So Elaine, we'll hand it to you, and we'll make you the host here right now so that you'll be able to share your presentation as well. So give us about 10 seconds. We'll turn that over to you.
Great, thank you. So I see up here where it says I'm the host now, so I can get rid of that when I'm done.
That's right.
I'm Elaine Howard. I'm a consultant who does just urban renewal consulting. I've been doing that for a little over 20 years and have worked with most urban renewal agencies across the state. So I helped Burns establish their urban renewal area. I have done a couple of urban renewal areas for Hermiston, and I have worked with LeGrand for the last 10 years or so on their urban renewal area. I've also done some work for Boardman out in your area, the Dalles, Hood River, kind of as you work your way into Portland. I will share my screen, and what I have tonight is we have on your agenda is the actual formation of the agency ordinance, but we also want to present the feasibility study. So what we talked about with David was going through an Urban Renewal 101 to talk about just urban renewal basics, since we also have Planning Commission members here, and then talking specifically about the financial feasibility study and potentially next steps. The presentation is fairly thorough, so if you wouldn't mind just writing your questions down as we go through, that way a lot of times questions get answered on the next slide or a couple of items down. So that way when we get to the end, we can just be sure to ask questions about something that wasn't covered or something that was unclear. Is that okay?
That will work great. Elaine, can I have you pause for just one moment? We're running a little bit longer than we had originally anticipated because we have planning commission afterwards. So we'll need to need a motion here to extend this meeting, say maybe up to 30 minutes, and then that could take you to 8 o'clock, and then planning commission would be immediately afterwards. So we'll need to do that before we go much further.
So I'll take a motion to extend the meeting for not more than 30 minutes.
Council President, I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting for up to 30 minutes longer.
Second.
We have a first and a second.
Counselor Funderburk.
Aye.
Counselor Duffloff.
Aye.
Counselor Katie McMillan.
Aye.
Counselor Smith.
Aye.
Counselor Dennis McMillan. Counselor McLean. Commissioner Leon Tejeda. Commissioner Gutierrez. Commissioner Nobles.
Aye.
Commissioner Jones. Commissioner Cooper.
Thank you, Elaine. Go ahead.
Okay, I will go fairly rapidly through this so that we have plenty of time for questions. Well, we'll be covering our urban renewal basics, the potential boundaries of an urban renewal area or two urban renewal areas, the financing and the impacts on taxing districts. First of all, urban renewal is not a new tax. Anybody who owns property and pays property taxes every year does not get an increased tax bill due to urban renewal in their community. The way urban renewal works is the impact of urban renewal is on taxing jurisdictions. When we pay our taxes, the county treasurer allocates those taxes out to all of the different regular taxing jurisdictions. So the city, the county, and the other taxing jurisdictions. Our property taxes in Oregon increase really for only two reasons. One, we're guaranteed almost a 3% assessed value increase every year. We are limited to that unless there are substantial improvements to our property or if there is new construction. That is the only way our property taxes can increase over that 3% annually. When you don't have urban renewal, those property tax increases go to all of those different regular taxing jurisdictions. When you form an urban renewal area within your city, that urban renewal area gets treated differently. And what I'm going through next is only for that urban renewal area, not for the rest of the city. So as new development occurs, or as that 3% property valuation increases every year, those monies go to the Urban Renewal Agency for the lifetime of the Urban Renewal Agency. Again, that is only for the specific properties within the urban renewal area. And that increase is comprised of that 3% increase that happens annually, and then any property value increase from new construction or substantial improvements. That also applies to any enterprise zone property that when it goes into the urban renewal area, it is in enterprise zone protections. When it comes out and it's within the boundary, all of the increased assessed value, then the taxes off of that go to the urban renewal agency. What is urban renewal in Oregon? It's an economic development tool mainly. It's unique in that it has financing attached to it. So lots of times we'll have downtown plans, or we'll have plans for industrial development, but we don't have money that comes with that to implement those plans. Urban renewal has tax increment financing as its implementation tool. It's used to address blighting influences in specific areas, and I'll talk about blight in a couple of slides. And it functions on those increases in property tax revenues in that urban renewal area. It's used all over the state. You can see here, LeGrand, Pendleton. I also am working in Pendleton right now. Hermiston, Boardman, all through here. But you can also see it's widely used up and down the coastline, up and down the I-5 corridor, across southern Oregon. So it is widely used throughout Oregon. In Oregon, you have to have blight as a precondition to forming any urban renewal area. Specifically, blight is defined in the statute ORS 457, and usually, excuse me, the conditions that exist that allow us to form urban renewal areas are underdevelopment or underutilization of property, poor conditions of buildings, or inadequacy of infrastructure, including streets, other rights of ways, open spaces, and utilities. So under that open spaces, that we don't often think of blight as not having open spaces, but the statute does specifically identify that. And there have been many urban renewal areas across the state who have used urban renewal funds to create fantastic parks within their community. Wilsonville is one of those. There are many others. So you may use urban renewal funds to create parks or to improve other open spaces, pathways within your community. An urban renewal area functions on an income source. That income source is that annual property tax revenue. It has its own budget. It has those annual expenses, which are projects, programs, and administration of that urban renewal area. And it has a spending limit. So this is different from looking at your own city budget. Urban renewal at the time, if you adopt an urban renewal plan, you establish what's called a maximum indebtedness of that plan. That maximum indebtedness is the total amount of money that can be spent over the life of an urban renewal district on projects, programs, and administration. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward to better explain how that's set and how it's used. Again, the concept of urban renewal is you have this frozen base assessed value at the time that an urban renewal area is established. All taxing districts continue getting their taxes off of that frozen base. Any increase, and this just shows those little 3% increases, and then potential new development, the taxes off of that is called increment, and that is what the Urban Renewal Agency functions upon. And once your projects are completed, you may still be paying off any debt on those projects that you have undertaken. At the time that an urban renewal area expires, this line has usually a 3% line, would look more like this. So you've created this additional value within the urban renewal area that now all taxing jurisdictions are able to share in the taxes on that value. Excuse me. Again, the impact of urban renewal is on taxing districts. It doesn't provide new money. It diverts funds that would otherwise go to other taxing districts. As I said, they continue receiving taxes on the frozen base. They temporarily, whatever the length of your urban renewal area is, forego taxes on growth. And many times that growth may not have occurred but for the investments that you were able to make with urban renewal. Impacts on taxing districts are a little different for school districts and education service districts. That is called an indirect impact. For other taxing districts, that impact is a direct impact. Those local property tax revenues go to the Urban Renewal Agency. So that impact is right here. And that agency has a little less money to spend because urban renewal is capturing some of that money. This shows a formula we put together for the state school fund a few years ago. It is very complex, but the biggest thing to understand is our schools are funded through the state school fund. That state school fund allocates funding out to our students at a per pupil ratio. That ratio does not change whether or not you have urban renewal within your community, or whether Pendleton has urban renewal or Portland has urban renewal. It is based on the funding that the legislature puts into that state school fund. Those local property tax revenues are one of the components that go into that state school fund. What we call backfilling is what happens if the legislature needs additional revenues beyond which come in from those property tax revenues. They backfill those revenues with other statewide funds. So no one really knows the answer on if our students would get more money per pupil if urban renewal didn't exist in the state. But we do know that the legislature understands that property tax exemptions and urban renewal impact the state school fund, and there are other resources that they may use to backfill that state school fund. There are statutory limitations on urban renewal for any city with a population under 50,000. They may have 25% of their assessed value of their property in the city in an urban renewal area and up to 25% of their acreage. Once you have an urban renewal plan, it cannot be increased by more than 20% of the original plan acreage. And you may not decrease acreage to be able to allow you to add more acreage in. To get to that 20%, the statute specifically talks about that original plan acreage. So if you had 100 acres in your area, you may never add more than 20 acres to that area. On the maximum indebtedness, which is that spending limit, you may not increase that by more than 20% of the original maximum indebtedness as indexed by inflation, unless you get approval of 75% of the other taxing districts who are impacted by an urban renewal plan. A city council may do that increase up to that 20%, excuse me, but it's called a substantial amendment, and it has to go through the same process as adopting an original urban renewal plan. So it is not an easy thing to do. There are also statutory limitations on the amount of assessed value that can be the amount of maximum indebtedness that can be established based on the amount of assessed value within your area. This particular limitation doesn't come up very often, but it does come up in your situation. So your limitation is that your maximum indebtedness for any urban renewal area may not exceed $50 million plus 50% of the total assessed value of the urban renewal area. And then there is also a cap, and that cap is about $78 million. So we'll talk about that more as we move ahead. But As we talk about that cap on the next few slides, the reason we have that cap is because it is specifically identified within the statute. A plan or a substantial amendment goes through a specific process of adoption. So the public is allowed to participate in any part of the original planning of the plan. A plan has to go to an agency for review to decide whether to send that out for formal public review. So that urban renewal agency is the ordinance that you have on your agenda tonight to do the first reading of. To establish an agency, it has to be by a non-emergency ordinance that takes 2 readings. So tonight would be the first reading, then your second reading, and then it takes 30 days before it comes into effect. That is the very first process of looking at the potential adoption of an urban renewal plan. If you move forward through all of this and decide not to adopt the urban renewal plan, you may either leave that agency on your books within your code, or you can rescind the ordinance forming the agency. So it does not compel you to adopt an urban renewal area. It only gives you the ability to adopt an urban renewal area. If you form that agency and review the draft plan and decide to send it out for a formal public review, it goes to your county commission for a presentation. They do not vote on it, but you are required to give them a formal presentation. It goes to your planning commission, where they will make a finding on whether or not the urban renewal plan conforms with the comprehensive plan. And then it will go to a city council hearing and vote. You have to notice that to either all postal patrons or all voters or all utility customers, but it has to be noticed citywide in one of those methods. And then that is also a non-emergency ordinance. The statute which governs urban renewal does have project limitations on the type of work that an urban renewal area may undertake. When urban renewal was first established in Oregon, they were really a workhorse of housing authorities. And we don't really use it in that method anymore, but that authority still remains within the statute. You may use them for rehabilitation and conservation, and those are both very wide terms. So that is both for raw land or for buildings. You can do acquisition. Acquisition cannot be, you may not use eminent domain for acquisition unless it is that eminent domain that is already authorized for cities for acquiring right-of-way or things that are needed for placement of utilities. But you may not acquire John Smith's land and then turn around and sell it to Betty Smith. You through eminent domain. You may acquire those properties only from willing sellers. You may do demolition, street and utility improvements, repair and rehab of buildings, relocation, disposition, neighborhood development programs. The development of parks and open spaces really is lodged under that neighborhood development programs, and then the making of grants and loans. The statute also specifies that there are 2 types of amendments on urban renewal plans that are substantial amendments. Those are whenever you increase your boundary over 1% of the original boundary area. And again, you may increase up to 20%, and any increase in maximum indebtedness. Those substantial amendments, again, have to go through that whole process that I just walked through with the county planning commission and city council. Anything else that you do to your plan, if you just add a new project or change a goal or an objective, are considered minor amendments and may be done by the agency by resolution. I'm going to stop quickly there to see if there are questions just about the general things, or if David would like me to just proceed through to the feasibility study findings.
I had a point of clarification question for you, Elaine. So if the, excuse me, on the the acreage change up to 20%. But
Yes.
even with that change, that's still within the maximum of 25% of the total acreage of the city, correct? So
That's
if on
correct.
day one, we're at 23%, you really can only increase up to no more than 2% total.
That's correct.
All right.
That's correct. We have those two filters that we have to look at whenever somebody comes to us and asks for an acreage increase. The 25% limitation overall, and is it under 20% of the area? Good point. Any other questions?
Nope, let's keep going.
So we found that statutory limitation on total maximum indebtedness, really your city was the first city where we've had to really sit down and brainstorm, okay, what do we do now because of that limitation? The answer that we came up with, or the proposal, is to form two separate urban renewal areas. And each of those urban renewal areas would have that $78 million maximum indebtedness authority. And I'll bring up a chart in a couple of minutes that shows you exactly what that means. But what that does mean is we have two boundary areas to look at. So we have this west feasibility study area, and the pink shows what would be in the west area. And you can see that it encompasses a lot of your right-of-way down through your commercial core and downtown, and also then other large parcels and some of your parcels that are in E-zone property tax abatement at this point. And then the blue shows the east boundary, and so you can see it picks up a portion of this tax lot. So it's splitting this tax lot into two portions to be able to add some increment early to this boundary area and to try to equalize the capacity in the two areas.
And
David,
Lane, if I
would you
can, because
like-
it's tough on the image to kind of tell. So all of the rights of way, all of the streets of McNary are included, but none of the parcels. So that allows you, for example, to make improvements to Willamette Street and Columbia for transportation improvements there. On the west side, it was all of the downtown. So all of those improvements on 7th Street and 8th Street, that would take you to the middle school and the high school. And then, of course, any other area in the downtown that doesn't have paving, mainly curb, gutter, sidewalk, street lights. There's a lot of that going on there. And then some of that area there near the Marina Apartments area along 3rd Street and those main streets there, once again, same sort of thing. We have roads, but we don't have curb, gutter, sidewalk, street lights, those kinds of things. So the majority of our boundaries, and we'll get into the total acreage here in a minute, it grabs this central data center, we call it PDX 63, and then this main commercial hub at 730 and 395. And then it grabs the undeveloped residential spaces there in the southeast area of South Hill. And then on the east side, it grabs the data centers that are there, the Hash Park, the golf course, and then Path that's there. So right now, as you know, on Lind Road, there's no infrastructure. We have a $20-ish million project to bring water and sewer down Lind Road. It'll end at that data center boundary there. That last 1,300-ish linear feet. We don't have identified funding for to bring city utilities to Path, which is our limiting factor there now. But that's why we can only have, no more than 30 beds and no more than like 26 ISUs, because we just don't have the permanent infrastructure there. And so this would allow us to be able to connect that area there and make those improvements on that facility there as well. So that's why this is proposed the way that you see it. Our acreage, we're still a little bit above our maximum. We'll talk about that in a minute, about what some of the things that we might want to change and kind of go from there. But wanted to show every area that you have in there, virtually, not all, but virtually every street. Basically every street in the downtown, every street in 3rd Street, every street in McNary, and Powerline Road, and then that new section there in the southeast area of South Hill is included in that.
Question.
Yes.
Does that also include, it would be the west portion, does that also include Madison, Jefferson?
It does not include Madison and Jefferson because Madison's being improved right now as we speak. Again, those intersections along power lines. So we have, what is that, Tyler and Pine and Jefferson are making those improvements on the apron of those. So that's the first roughly 20 feet of that intersection, but it doesn't include the extension further of those streets. We certainly can work on that. Again, we're pushing right up against, right at the moment, the proposal, we're over our maximum acreage, but we'll talk about that in a minute on some ideas that we think we can do to get there.
Just a quick question if I could. Is this, so you're saying this could still be amended, the boundaries, it isn't locked in yet? And the specific question I would have, about a year before you got here, the fertilizer plant talked with Kim at the port, Russ and Brandon. They wanted to do a light switch. Port had given them the land, they could move up there, but they wanted some funds to move so they wouldn't have to spend a lot of money. Would this type of program be able to help move that fertilizer plant to the port and open that, the city would have that land and be able to utilize it at a better purpose?
The program could help us build the infrastructure available that would certainly make that a more palatable economic development swap, but it wouldn't include, the land acquisitions are, as you heard Elaine say, are eligible for those swaps, but it has to be land within the boundary. So we have to identify each of those parcels specifically, include them in our total acreage now in order to spend those funds for acquisition and land swap. But the roads and things like that that are leading up, all of that, we have those identified currently in there. So if we know what those are in advance, we could include those in the boundary.
That's kind of what, and I think she also said relocation as well as acquisition, so you wouldn't necessarily have to acquire it.
Correct, but Elaine, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can relocate. That's true. But both parcels, if there's a relocation or if you're doing a swap, both parcels have to be included inside the urban growth boundary area.
Okay, thank you.
And I believe that's correct. They would have to be both within the urban renewal area.
But one of the things that we wouldn't be able to do is it does not include non-infrastructure vertical facilities. So we wouldn't be able to build, for example, a warehouse. We wouldn't be able to build a police station or a city hall or a fire station or anything like that. You would be able to build park spaces. We heard about that. So eligible funds for hash parks, improvements at the golf course. We had Nugent Park identified in there if we wanted to continue to expand there. All of those are identified and would be eligible expenses. I saw a chat from the mayor. I'll read that real quick. He just said, we heard from both fire and school district that they were concerned about not knowing about this. The presenter shared that the funding does come from the taxing districts. The school request asked for only the difference between the amount they'd get per student and any amount that would be above that. That seems similar to what Ms. Howard stated, but different than what President Duffloff implied. When is our meeting scheduled with the various taxing districts? How will we make sure we're listening to them before we decide this? Yeah, so I'll start at the end on that. So earlier in Ms. Howard's slide, she had sort of where we are in the process here. So right now, we're looking to establish the agency, and we'll actually bring that to you for a first reading at your next meeting on August 5th. We wanted to make sure we had all the questions and everything lined up here before we presented you that ordinance in first reading. Plus, we had to give a proper notice with the EO only publishing once. Now you have to give them a way long head start. And so we're at the part now where we forming the agency. So between the time of the agency being formed and these two proposed plans, a west plan and an east plan, that's when we'll have the opportunity to go and talk with other agencies. Other taxing districts that are there, and what ideas we might be able to come up with to help mitigate some of those impacts, or what level of interest we are interested in, or ways in which we can mitigate those impacts. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too in just a moment.
And the reason we wait to do that is the feasibility study gives us the information to be able to talk with people with real facts. And we don't want to talk with them before we've talked with the city council, because you want to make sure the city council is on board with moving ahead, and you don't want to get out in front of them. So the process really is to do the feasibility study, present it, see if you're interested in moving forward and getting taxing district input. and forming the agency. So this is a typical process, and I've done it hundreds of times, and it works well. These are the statutory limitations. As David said, we are a little over the acreage, but we can address that if we move forward. We are under the assessed value limitations, so we have no problems there. Again, on the maximum indebtedness, there is a statutory limitation of about $78 million for each boundary. This to me is really one of the most important slides in this, because if we just one boundary and we had a limitation of $78 million, that would be all you would have to spend on projects and programs. If we do two boundaries, we end up with double that amount of money, $155 million, to be able to spend to reinvest into your community. So that is what we have recommended. If you can certainly direct us to go otherwise, but that gives you the most financial capacity, because each one of those boundaries gets limited. But if you do two separate boundaries, you can add those together. This is an important slide also for any taxing districts watching, or to be able to pass on to taxing districts. Is initially that increment goes to the Urban Renewal Agency, but there are also limitations as to how much of that increment an agency can take, and at what points they then have to start sharing that increment with other taxing districts. So here you can see in the orange is once any of those data centers come online, that increment starts getting shared with the other taxing districts. So all of that money doesn't go to the Urban Renewal Agency. Because of statutory restrictions, part of that gets shared with the other taxing districts. And it goes down here at the end, because at this point, you're reaching your maximum indebtedness, so you have to take just a small amount of increment here. So this is what the west boundary would look like. The east boundary is a little bit different in terms of its trajectory. The west boundary has the potential of residential development happening here. This is really, the economic model is based on your data centers, and it shows the sharing right up front, and also shows at the end the little bit. So while urban renewal is set up to take any increase in assessed value, once you hit 12.5% of your total maximum indebtedness, you have to share anything above that with all of the different taxing districts. We do have that data to show with these boundaries what that amount would be. So for revenue sharing, these are 7-year totals, because that is the time frame that revenue would be shared. And it shows what amount of revenue would be shared with the different taxing districts over that time frame. Revenue sharing happens at the assessor's office before any tax increment is released. So one of the questions that I have a lot of times is, well, is that revenue sharing something we can give back to the school districts, and so they can get that outside of the state school fund? And unfortunately, the answer to that is no, because that revenue sharing happens before you ever get that money, and it happens as part of filling out in every July the forms that tell the assessor excuse me, how much money the agency gets and how much money will be shared. So this is something we'd be happy to go over more with any of the taxing districts. That revenue sharing actually, these areas, most urban renewal areas are 25 to 30-year urban renewal areas. I believe these are 17-year urban renewal areas. They're much shorter because of the amount of assessed value and taxes that will come in from your industrial developments. And that revenue sharing happens once those industrial developments that have the E-zone exemption start coming on board. This shows you the impacts to the, excuse me, taxing districts from the west boundary and shows you those annually. This is, excuse me, within your feasibility study. So this is for the general governments. This is for education. This is for the east boundary, and this is for education. And you can see that these add up to that about $78 million each. I'm going to get some water while you think about questions. I'll be right back.
Actually, like, give me a moment. We're actually pushing against our 30-minute extension. We're going to need a little bit more if you would be willing to do that. Otherwise, we'll need to pause.
I apologize about that. And Planning Commission, I really apologize for taking up your time. I'll take a motion to accept 15-minute extension.
We don't mind. This is pretty.
Okay. Do you want to go 30? That's fine. Okay.
I can go
Okay.
back to any slide. I'm sorry, you have to do a motion.
So at this time, I'm looking for a motion for 30-minute extension on the meeting.
Council President, I'd like to make a motion, we extend up to another 30 minutes.
I have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have motions.
Counselor Funderburk.
Aye.
Counselor Duffloff.
Aye.
Counselor Katie McMillan.
Aye.
Counselor Smith.
Aye.
Counselor Dennis McMillan. Counselor McLean. Commissioner Leon Tejeda. Commissioner Gutierrez. Commissioner Nobles.
Aye.
Commissioner Jones. Commissioner Cooper.
Thank you. We're ready for you, Elaine.
Okay. So I can either stop sharing or I can go back to any slide if people have questions about any slide here. So let me know your preference.
Okay, at this time, we're open for questions and deliberation. So fire away, everyone.
So, I mean, what is your model showing for how quickly you get to the 12.5% total value on the lease to the lot?
Could someone repeat the question into a microphone, please?
Yeah, Elaine, so the question is, what does the model show for how quickly we get to that 12.5% max, but for both the east and the west?
It is 8 years. And if I'll go back to this share, you can see the amount of funds that are taken from the agencies up until that point is very nominal. And let's go back to the other taxing districts. So under 15,000 a year for the city itself until that year 2035 when revenue sharing begins. And at that year, you start getting a lot more money for the agency. But in that year, the taxing districts, that is the year they start getting money also.
Thank you.
So if I can also elaborate that on a little bit. So what's happening in 2035, so you understand, and is that PDX 63 that's right there in the middle of town that we've split the north end and the south end of it to create the east and west of the boundaries. It finishes its abatement program in the enterprise zone that year in 2035. And so what you get in 2035, while these dollars can be somewhat substantially larger than where it tapers off to basically 5.3 million each year thereafter, is that the urban renewal is always a year behind in catch up. And so that 12.5% rule allows for sort of a one year where it's a misnomer or off. So you're going to have that 1 year where it bounces up and it's actually going to go well above that. You're allowed to keep that, but you have to adjust that back down to that 12.5% in the years thereafter. So you see that big bump in 2035.
Yeah.
So what that means in the real world for us here in connection with the enterprise zone would be that if the URA is not approved and doesn't move on in 2035, each of those taxing districts will receive their funds according to their own permanent tax rate. What ends up happening here is it would mean if the plan is approved, you would wait one more year. So in the year 2035, where they would normally get their full appropriation, in 2035, there would be no appropriation, none from the enterprise zone and none from urban renewal. And then in 2036, then there's revenue sharing that occurs in that year. So for those districts right now, there's earmarks in the enterprise zone, specifically some, and they're nominal for the fire district, for the school district, and in SABES for the hospital district. But outside of those nominal contributions that are there, those other districts aren't receiving funds through the enterprise zone. So it would mean that those districts for one more year would continue to not receive any of those funds and then start revenue sharing thereafter. For the hospital district, for the fire district, they would have that year where they would receive neither. But the following year, right now, they're getting nominal. PDX 63, I think, they get two fundings. They get both an earmark and then a $25 million appropriation of assessed value. It comes to about, I think it's 55,000 give or take for the earmark, and it's about 75,000 give or take for that appropriation, about 130,000. And so, but starting in 2036, it would be over $1 million. With the revenue sharing, but it's still not the full appropriated amount if the urban renewal did not exist.
Okay. I got tons of questions and I got to organize them in my brain. Okay, so I just have to kind of organize my thoughts here. So my question is, in reading other, Hermiston, LeGrand, Burns, so forth, I seen that the agency was actually able to help those districts with infrastructure, so forth, so on, through the agency. Is that correct?
Yes and no, it depends. So for example, if you're going to build a new school or if you're going to create a new firehouse or something like that, the agency could absolutely pick up 100% of the tab of the infrastructure associated with that expansion or improvement. Yes.
Well, and that's kind of what I see.
So that would be street improvements, water, sewer, and so on.
That's what it looks like they've done to help with those taxing districts as well. So it's available that board or that committee can do what they want to when it comes to those taxing districts. With regard to.
Go ahead, Elaine.
Thank you. Sorry. They may not pay any operations funds, so they can't pay for staffing. But they can pay for infrastructure, utilities, like what you talked about. Safe routes to schools for school districts is great, or even if there's a park that's associated with the school district, they could pay for something like that. But if they do what's called a public building, there's another level of approvals by other taxing districts, and it is possible, but only possible with other taxing districts concurring with that expenditure.
Okay, that makes sense.
So one of the points that Elaine mentioned, and she had the slide up earlier, so there's more than 60 cities in Oregon have an urban renewal agency, and each of those cities have at least one area. And on her sort of heat map that she had, they either have 1, 2, 3, one Portland, 15, that sort of thing. And she mentioned that there's likely some impact on the state school fund associated with that, but there's 241 cities in Oregon, so more than 1 out of 4 have urban renewal. And so if you consider that those cities, through their urban renewal, are not sending funds to the school fund, that means that those dollars stay in their community here. They take those education dollars and they stay here. What that would mean specifically for the Umatilla School District right now is, so right now, the Umatilla School District, through its AV, its ad valorem tax collection, it collects approximately $6.5 million each year through its permanent permanent tax rate of AV. It sends, as she had in the slide there, it sends that to the state. They do their formula and we get back a little more than $21 million. The school district gets back a little bit more than $21 million. So if the urban renewal for the school, for the Umatilla School District specifically, if the urban renewal does not exist, when PDX 63 comes out of the abatement program, it's likely that the assessed value of the city is going to nearly double. We're about $1 billion of assessed value today citywide, which includes PDX2, but it's a smaller campus. Each of these new campuses coming on are estimated to bring between $700 million and $900 million in assessed value. So theoretically, we can just say easy math, it'll virtually double. It'll go from $6.5 million to about 12 million. But in that scenario, they still send 12 million now to the state, and they still get that same $21 million back. And so the idea here is that increase, that $6.5 million increase that year, can stay here in Umatilla, can go towards water, sewer, streets, curb gutter, sidewalks, street lights, those kinds of things, that infrastructure improvement to help address blight and to be an economic development tool. And so we don't really hit, and you heard it in the public comment, we hit those thresholds when we get over roughly $21 million. And that'll happen when probably about the third data center, when it comes out of the abatement program, which will be about 13 years from now, we'll get close to that. We'll probably be, in today's dollars, it would be right around 18 million collected for the school district. But my guess is that the school fund at that point in time would be somewhere in the ballpark of 23, 24 million. So we're getting closer, but we're still not there. In that case, we would send 18 million to the state. They would still send back 21 million using the same 2025 dollars. And so the biggest issue there. So as you look at those other 60 cities and those urban renewal areas throughout the state, that sort of math is happening in 1 out of 4 cities throughout the state. We're one that's not doing that yet. And so that's where we look at this as a very powerful economic development tool and a way to address blight, specifically our aging infrastructure, and to be able to address our unbelievably rapid growth, as you saw. That's why we wanted to have it tonight as well with the buildable lands inventory and the economic opportunity analysis, because the two of them really come in line as we're making our predictions. You saw that our buildable lands, or our estimated number of jobs, is going to double in the next decade, is the estimation there. So we think we're growing quickly now, but we haven't seen nothing yet. We're about to really come into it.
So with that in mind, it seems like the biggest thing for me is to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place as our growth goes. And this to me seems like the easy button, in the fact that it's going to kickstart everything. And if we have more and more coming into our area, we're going to need sewer, we're going to need water, we're going to need all those things. So this is a great opportunity for us to kickstart it. Am I right?
Yeah, from a simply dollars and cents from the city, that's correct. It's a great opportunity. Now, the impacts to the other districts, it can be substantial. There will be revenue sharing. It will be more than they've received to date because it's coming on there, but it wouldn't be that full appropriation. By the way, we're one of those districts as well. So on the slide that was in there, the city's going to see a reduction in its general fund in that same 2035 of more than $5 million. So fully discretionary funds is going to leave the city and go into the agency specifically for infrastructure. So it's no longer discretionary funds, or I would say it's moderated discretionary funds within the agency of how it can be spent. And then each year, as it levels out at that maximum 12.5%, then it's distributed equally that way as well. So one of the next steps, and I appreciate the question from comment and from Mayor, is that what are those impacts going to look like to each of those districts? And we know the math. And what are some things that we can do to mitigate some of those impacts? And so revenue sharing is going to help. They're going to get whatever that number comes to, roughly 50, 60% of what they would normally get if the urban renewal did not exist. And so what are we doing with that delta that's there? What does that look like? And so we might be able to do things like infrastructure improvements associated with capital projects and things like that to take away that financial burden that may be associated with their future growth. The other way, what's interesting for us is our enterprise zone funding, and we've talked about that now for a while. But in particular, the last year and a half, the idea here is that as new enterprise zone participants begin, so PDX 121, SABE, PDX 260, they come with a different earmarks specific to the city and the county. In general, it's about $1.5 million to $3 million a year, depending on where they are in their development. And the idea there would hopefully be that we'd be able to use that future enterprise zone dollars, enter into intergovernmental agreements with the other taxing districts, and figure out ways to get them either close to a net zero or mitigate that impact as close to zero as we can, maybe even better if we created some sort of utility grant program or something like that. So there's still a lot of work to be done there through that. And we would absolutely need to formalize those through intergovernmental agreements so that they have assurances. Even the city of Umatilla would have to form a contract with the Urban Renewal Agency as well. There'd have to be agreements there. And so there's a lot of work there to be done. We don't know if we have it dollar for dollar. I mean, we just don't know if we'll be able to get there or not. That math and that calculation still needs to occur. But we can get relatively close, we think.
Well, it just sounds like to me that this is literally the incubation. This is the very, very beginning of things. Do we want to even do it? And that's kind of what I'm getting is the fact that, is this something we want to move forward? Am I right?
Yeah, so tonight, if we're looking at, so what we'll bring you on August 5th is that first reading to create the agency. 2 weeks or a month later, create the second reading, and 35 days after that, then the agency's created. Between those readings and that time of the agency being created, we can go meet with the other districts to talk about those plans. We're statutorily required to go to the county, but we can talk to anybody who wants to talk to us, and I'm assuming they all want to talk to us. And so we'll have those conversations, and then we'll be able to come up. I would say, for me anyway, there's been discussion about sort of a uniform approach. We can definitely do that if there's interest in that. I would say that each taxing district is unique and a little bit different, and we should probably be looking at sort of customized approaches that might be able to work there. But there maybe some sort of hybrid where there's a uniform and a custom sort of combined. There's still work to be done there is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it just, again, I want everybody to just keep in mind that this is us building a